Welcome to the fifth lecture in the short lecture series on Silk by Alessandro Barrico. This lecture will cover chapters 16 to 20. Building the summary of 16 to 17 chapter, Joncourt narrates his entire story at length and only stops when Harake takes his eyes off him. Harake wishes that he would return to Japan and informs him that he has fish eggs which are worthless. Herve Joncourt moves his teacup around and finds the spot from where the mistress had sipped and drinks exactly from that position. Then he puts the cup down and mentions that he is already aware of it. Harake laughs at this and asks him whether that is why he paid in false gold to the man who had sold him the fish egg, and Joncourt affirms it. They negotiate on a fair trade, and Joncourt leaves the room with an awareness of the girl's eye still being on him. Herve Joncourt undertakes a 3-month journey after 6 days of staying with Harake and reaches Lavilledieu in April, just in time for the High Mass. He thanks God at the gate of his town and counts each of his steps back to his home so that he would not forget them, almost naming them. To Baldibu's query after the journey about how the end of the world is, Joncourt typically responds in a single word: invisible. He has brought a smooth, almost invisible silk tunic for Helen from his journey, which she quietly packs away and never wears out of modesty. Now, let's analyze what we have read. Through all these chapters, Harake appears as a man of great civility. He has a home and a female companion. He serves tea to his guests, and he also speaks French, which means he is been in contact with the European world. Harake is portrayed as a landed gentleman rather than a shifty foreigner, which is how most people would generally visualize a character or a person from the Asian countries. Joncourt is not even his peer. Harake clearly is way above him, as he rules his home and the village like a castle and has the authority of a king among the villagers, although he wears no outward symbol of his power. He is a man who communicates very well through postures and silence as well as in words. Harake's mistress, on the other hand, is portrayed in bright colors, red and later on in orange. Especially red, the color of passion, seduction, and desire, and so stands out in contrast against Harake's household and the somber tunics that he wears, which are always in black and gray, and as well as the shadows of the tree, which also cast a dark shadow that surround the house in which Harake lives. In fact, she is described as a flame on a bed of ash. Fire represents passion and destruction, both of which are themes of this novel. Harake clearly is associated with the opposite, which is the ash. The mistress also communicates very well using posture and silence. She commands Joncourt's attention throughout the meeting merely by opening her eyes and looking at him. She is bold enough to initiate the love affair literally beneath Harake's nose. Joncourt and this woman share a teacup, which is a very important ceremonial occasion for the Japanese, in a manner that is flagrantly sexual. The professional banter between Harake and Joncourt suggests that Harake is unaware of the exchange between his mistress and his guest, although he may just be ignoring it. Joncourt's wife's refusal to wear the tunic that he brought to her and Jonco's comment to Baldebou about how the end of the world is invisible are examples of how Joncourt has compartmentalized his experience in Japan. He actually even prays and counts his step to his home in order to forget what happened in Japan and to concentrate on his current place, that is his home. Tunic is of such fine cloth that it is like being woven out of nothing at all. And Japan is equally invisible because Jonko spends so much time blindfolded, but also because he cannot allow himself to think about what happened there. It would interrupt his peaceful existence with his wife. Eggs. Now, moving on to chapter 18 to 20. The eggs that Jonko brought back from Japan were very fertile and of such high quality that the quantity and quality of silk that was produced in Lavildale for that year, that is 1861, was huge. Actually, so huge that two more silk mills could be opened up, which meant more work for the people as well as more profit for the entire town. Baldebou adds on to the chapel of Saint Agnes because of this. Obviously, seems like because he's also celebrating the kind of profit that the town has seen in that year by commissioning a Spanish architect named Juan Benitez to build a cloister which was round with a garden and a dolphin head and has dolphin heads instead of bull's heads. Jonker became rich from this venture and bought 30 acres of land to the south of his home where he plans to build a park which would be quiet and pleasant to walk in during especially the summers. In the summers that he spends with his wife in Lavilledieu, he spends most of the day in Verdun's cafe, probably talking to Baldebou and others, as well as reading the newspaper there. And the evenings were spent with his wife in the portico, where she would read aloud books in her beautiful voice to him. He turned 33 in 1862, and his life fell like rain before his eyes, very quietly. Herve Joncourt travels again to Japan in September 1862, and in this journey he is again advised by Baldebou to not be afraid of anything. On his arrival, two servants again take his bag away and guide him to a path at the edge of a wood. He walks through the path canopied by trees and arrives at a lake. Near the lake, Harake and the woman dressed in orange are sitting. She turns around and looks at him precisely at the moment that Jonko lays his eyes on her. By the time by the time Jonko reaches the lake, the woman has abandoned her robe and entered the water. Harake quietly greets Jonko and they share conversations and silence till evening, sitting beside that lake. When they finally rise up to leave, the woman has still not come out of the water, and so Joncourt very deftly drops his glove near her orange robe, which is abandoned on the shore. Joncourt was Harake's guest for 4 days, and he spends his days in a guest house, living like a king. 5 servants attend to his every need and serve him tea twice a day under a tree. In the evenings, 3 old women with their faces colored with white grease paint aid him in his bath and dry him with warm silk clothes. Their hands are very light, though they are gnarled from age. On the second day, Jonco meets an Englishman in the village who is also there for trading, but he is not there for selling. He is there for selling and not for buying. He has been selling weapons in Japan for 7 to 8 years. So he has a lot more experience than Joncourt in traveling to Japan and in trading with the Japanese. Joncourt dines with this man, and while they're dining, the man narrates all the stories of adventure that he has experienced in his travels to Japan. Jonko waits for the man to finish his stories, and at the end of the conversation, he asks him about a young European woman who is living in the village. The Englishman declares that there are no European women in Japan and closes the conversation. He leaves the next day loaded with gold after exchanging it for the weapons. Now, the analysis of chapter 18 to 20. Baldibu's insistence on dolphins instead of the customary bulls on a cloister added to the chapel of St. Agnes is an example of a man imposing his own symbolism onto an existing established tradition, thus breaking away from the restrictive form of religion and personalizing the religion for himself. His selection of dolphins instead of the standard Christian animals further removes him from the realm of the other ordinary people of level due, creating more mystery around him. In contrast to the silent tea ceremony that Joncourt enacted with the mistress of Harake during the winter, the entire summer Joncourt spends listening to his wife reading aloud. This difference in communication with the two women of his life underscores the polarization of Joncourt's affections. Silence and speech, viscera and intellect, home and abroad, all of these come together in his relationship with the two women. In the second journey to Japan, Joncourt disrupts the intimacy of the Japanese couple in two ways. He stumbles on them literally when the mistress is swimming naked in a lake, which is a private moment between Harake and his mistress. And on top of it, he propositions the mistress by leaving a personal object for her to find. Joncourt's first act upon arriving in Harake's village is to betray the very man who has been friendly and generous and upon whom the economy of Leveldew relies. Here again, we see how imperialism worked. They do not care about how the colonized feels or the person that they're trading with felt. They only came to seek whatever they needed, which is the case if we look at in terms of colonization of India. The initial stages were similar. The traders from England who came in only sought to make benefits and profits for themselves. They actually did not care for the people that they were trading with. And they did not care for how they felt, the customs of the people. Nothing was respected. All of it was narrowed down to how they could benefit and how they could profit off the people. This is a very typical colonial and imperialist attitude that we see displayed in Joncourt. Joncourt becomes obsessed with Harake's mistress and is openly indiscreet about it. He converses about her with another European who has a connection with Harake. Broaching the subject is a risky matter in that village, and it is possible that the word somehow might get back to Harake about the conversation. Joncourt is accompanied by Harake's servant everywhere that he goes and who are probably spying on him. In spite of this, he is bold enough to ask the European about this woman. Englishman's denial of European women living in Japan could mean either that Harake's mistress is not of European origins or that Harake has a mistress of European descent who has been successfully hidden from the public eye, which would be a testament to the fact of remoteness of Harake's provinces and the deference he receives from his villagers who keep this woman's reality or existence a secret. The former scenario would lessen Joncourt's authority, and the latter would enhance Harake's. In either case, it shows the imbalance in the relationship between the two men and the strong control that Harake has as of now of the situation. The overall analysis of these chapters shows themes like imperialism, colonialism, colonial trade, illicit relationship, duplicity practiced by human beings, and again, religion is also brought into these chapters as a theme. The techniques used continue to be symbolism, especially symbolism of colors is very high in these five chapters. The use of contrast or paradoxes and gap filling technique from postmodernism. The next video will be on chapters 21 to 25.